While the Denver Broncos have had a fantastic offseason, already improving upon a team that won more games than they have over the past 7 years, our rivals across the AFC West just keep getting more and more bad news, which is great news for the Denver Broncos because our easiest path back to the playoffs, obviously, is not even worrying about that wild card position, it's winning the division. And we're hearing news out of all three camps that make me just smile in excitement just because of the horrendous offseason that we're seeing in Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and in Kansas City. So let's dive into the great news, which is their bad news. If you're new to this channel, my name is Ben, diehard Denver Broncos fan. It helps me out tremendously if you like the Broncos. If you would hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which one of our AFC division rivals do you think has had the worst offseason. And it's going to be hard to make that decision because it's been bad for all of them. And even national media outlets are saying how bad the offseason have been for all of those. So looking right here, obviously hearing that the Denver Broncos might try to make a run at the division seems like preposterous, right? Seems like really out of the question. But we got to remember that we finished tied for second place last year in our division, just a few games behind Kansas City after playing them twice, very tough, one time beating them, one time losing, and kind of a scheduled loss there on that Thursday night game, which we've broken down before. So obviously we have a streak. Sean Payton has been breaking streaks left and right. The streaks last year that he broke that were amazing was how long it had been since we'd won in Buffalo, how long it had been since we beat the Chiefs, how long it had been since we were in playoff contention late in the season, and so much more. One of the ones he did not break, however, was our losing streak to the Las Vegas Raiders, and I believe that's going to change this year. So the Raiders have had a pretty poor offseason for sure, with Aiden O'Connell at quarterback, then going out and rather than drafting someone or making a move or getting a big name, instead going out and just getting Gardner Minshew, who really can be a serviceable backup, but I don't think anyone in their right mind thinks that Gardner Minshew is even in the same conversation when you now have Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Bo Nix in the division. That right away you're talking you have the fourth best quarterback in the division. And then really their standout player who they've had for years is Josh Jacobs. So there's so much that's come out just recently with Josh Jacobs. He's been a beast in Denver. I've hated playing against him. I feel like he always just eats on us and that we can't ever stop the run when we play him. So I'm thrilled to death that he's leaving. But even more so, here's why I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled because he essentially says, like, hey, they wanted me to come back. And the line of this thing is they wanted me to come back on a discount and lose. And so he's essentially saying, like, they wanted me to lose. He isn't even up on the Raiders' chances and says, like, hey, I'm not going to take a discount for a bad team. So when your former standout player is calling you a bad team, that is not a good sign. The other thing that is fantastic about this is hearing how his coach, Antonio Pierce, who was the interim coach last year of the Vegas Raiders, really wanted him back, and that it was the owner who didn't let him have him back. And so I think anytime you see some kind of butting of heads between an ownership group and the coach, that's fantastic. I think very clearly that Sean Payton is getting everything he wants and more. I think there are a lot of owners who, if they had Russell Wilson locked into that deal, would have forced the head coach to be like, no, this is who you're playing with. But we know Sean Payton wants to be able to buy the groceries and then cook the meal. So it's fantastic that we have a coach who is able to make decisions and who has the full faith and backing of the owner, which is awesome. So then we see Max Crosby is one of the main reasons that Antonio Pierce got that job. Max Crosby actually threatened to quit the team if they did not sign, here's the line right here, threatened drastic measures if they did not sign Antonio Pierce. So it just seems like a big cluster there in Las Vegas where if your star player can be the one who's like forcing your coach back, that's not good. Then you even see Max Crosby on a recent interview basically say like, hey, I'm not going to just jump ship and go play somewhere to win. I'm here for the highs and the lows. So essentially he's like, hey, I'm ready for this low.
Took the easier road travel, and that's really not the way I look at it. I feel
He just mentioned how he's not like LeBron. He's not there to take the easy road, which is implying there's a hard road ahead.
for me, going through it and going through the ups and downs and the hardships, Um,
So all he's talking about in there is the ups and the downs and the hardships. I think he knows he's got some hard years without a quarterback there, with an aging superstar and wide receiver in Devontae Adams. I don't think they got better whatsoever. And even with how they were last year, I think with Bo Nix and this squad we have now, I think we beat the Raiders last year, and we've gotten even better, and they've gotten worse on most accords. The other thing that's exciting for me is just looking at the coaching decision that they made. There were crazy good coaches available in this offseason. I'm living right now in the state of Michigan, and people could not be higher on Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator from the Detroit Lions. Dan Quinn, fantastic. We got Mahomes' former offensive coordinator and Eric Bieniemy. There's just we had Harbaugh on the market, and so Max Crosby basically gets them to ball out of control and get Antonio Pierce. And I think that's really short-sighted. There are so many examples in the NFL and in the NBA of a team really rising to the occasion for an interim head coach. And then when that interim head coach gets the full-time job, they fall off a cliff immediately. I remember Mike Munchak was like that. Romeo Crennel from the Houston Texans was like that. There's a ton of times where your interim head coach comes in, they ball out of control, and then they fall off a cliff. And I really envision that being what happens this year for the Vegas Raiders, which is why Josh Jacobs is like, hey, I'm not about to take a pay cut on a bad team. And so that is fantastic news for the Denver Broncos. I even remember after Nathaniel Hackett was fired, the best 2 games of our entire season were playing for Jerry Rosburg. We almost beat the Kansas City Chiefs. It was I think we lost by 4 points or 3 points, 27-24 to the Chiefs. And then we won our last game of the season. So he had a higher winning percentage in his 2 games as Denver Broncos head coach than Nathaniel Hackett. But it would have been like Crazy Town USA if all of a sudden we hired him, and instead we went out and got Sean Payton, who I think it's going to turn out that he is going to be one of the best coaches this year in NFL football, and we're fixing to find out right now. But I think what he did in New Orleans, I just look at, we just heard that for the very first time, Drew Brees was inducted into their very first Ring of Fame type thing. We got the Ring of Fame at Mile High where all the players' names are. They have never even had a Ring of Fame in New Orleans. So he's the very first Hall of Fame type player. I think the New Orleans Saints only have 3 or 4 players in the entire NFL Hall of Fame, whereas the Denver Broncos have 8 or 9 or something like that. We're obviously going to have some dudes from our last Super Bowl team who have not had a chance to be inducted yet. So that number should be 10 by the end of the next 2 or 3 years. And so I think the Denver Broncos are a much better historical organization than the Saints. And for Sean Payton to do what he did with the Saints, I cannot wait to see what he's going to do with the Denver Broncos. So let's dive over to other bad news in our other divisional foes. So we're looking at the Los Angeles Chargers. They have no identity. They shipped out in what was the worst deal of the entire NFL offseason, or the best deal if you're a Chicago Bears fan. They ship out Justin Herbert's number 1 target, who caught 36% of all of Herbert's completions last year were caught by Keenan Allen. And then another 10% or so were caught by Mike Williams. And both of those dudes, they just ship out. Austin Eckler, who's a Colorado boy, shipped out. And so I think it's fantastic news. One of the things I really enjoy doing is going onto Reddit for different teams and looking at their message boards for each of their teams. And the vibes in Los Angeles about this team are not good. And I think that is a really good litmus test for us to, I think if you take the vibes in Broncos country, we all feel like we are on the bounce back. Whereas in Los Angeles, it's you really got rid of all 3 good offensive weapons. And what talent did they bring in? They draft a tackle instead of drafting another replacement for Keenan Allen, and then they go out and they get Will Dissly. I think they got one more tight end who was a backup on one of my fantasy teams. The guy who used to be in the Patriots, Hunter Henry or something like that. That was their big moves of the offseason. Where the Denver Broncos' big move is we get Josh Reynolds, and if you're trying to rank our depth chart at wide receiver, we got Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Marvin Mims was in the Pro Bowl. We go out and draft Troy Franklin. Everyone's crazy high on him. And then we got Josh Reynolds. So you could make an argument that like the guy who we went out and got, who's like our 5th best wide receiver, who was the 2nd or 3rd best wide receiver on the Detroit Lions, like we're just a much deeper team at the running back position, at the wide receiver position. We had a great offseason. Obviously, the Chargers had a bad offseason. The Raiders had a bad offseason. And driving over to Kansas City, where they can't even pass a bond to figure out to build a new stadium for their team. There's talks that the team might actually be moving its location. Whereas like even with our giant losing streak we've had in Denver, we still sell out every game. We are diehard fans. We're Broncos country because it's like that entire area of the nation is all orange and blue. And so that's great. And really, most of the Kansas City Chiefs salary cap is going to aging superstars. And we know next year, we showed this graph, Travis Kelce is going to be 35, and the best years for a tight end are your 24, 25, 26, 27. And so he's going to have to continue to just be a unicorn and outperform Father Time. And I just don't think he's got the same dog in him anymore now that he's traveling the country with Taylor Swift. Then we're seeing that they're also they have a suspension coming for Rashee Rice that is probably a 2-3 game suspension, but there are some national media outlets saying that it could be a double-digit suspension. It all depends how hard does Roger Goodell want to come down on this, and I think but at the very least they're going to be missing their number 1 target for a couple of games, and then on top of that, you have an aging superstar who's not coming in the season having trained and having his best offseason of all time. Instead, he's on the Eras Tour with Taylor Swift. And then they go out and they draft the fastest ever person to run in his underwear at the combine in Xavier Worthy, who hasn't been able to practice because of hamstring issues. We saw with Riley Moss as a rookie missing minicamp, missing OTAs. That is crucial for your development. And hamstrings, as we see with Dulcich, are things that they linger a long time, especially if you're a speed guy. So I think that is fantastic news. And then obviously they put a bunch of faith in signing Marquise Brown, who has drastically underperformed everywhere he's gone, has kind of been a me first guy, very Jerry Jeudy-ish in that way, and really rubbed quarterbacks the wrong way. And I guess if any team can figure him out, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes, but you just see a lot of boom or bust potential, and I am tending to lead to him being a bust. But a lot to be excited about as the Denver Broncos continue to hit banger after banger in this offseason, and the rest of the teams in our division are taking at least 1 step back, and we're taking 3 steps forward, and in Broncos country, we believe. Oh, that was halfway down, that one. That was good.